for all to see, the signs we've lost our way. When we jail our heroes and applaud our villains and turn our hearts away, like a silent choir, too scared to sing the anthem of a braver day, the ballad of Dr. Bruce Paix.
Well, there we are. Bruce, hello there, sir. How are you?
Good evening.
Just checking that the sound was coming through, and it looks like it's streaming through okay. So this is our first live stream to the Cafe Locked Out crowd as well. So hello to the Cafe Locked Out crowd who might be streaming live. Finally got there. Bruce has finally got the Starlink up and running, and let's see how well Elon Musk's technology performs for Bruce Paix out there in Victoria. So, g'day, Cobber. So we got a bit to cover, man.
Yeah, there's big stories every week, aren't there? And there's two real big stories this week, and I'll touch on both of those directly.
Yeah, crazy what's been going on. And, we were only just chatting a little bit off air before we come on about the, even our own woke left politicians going absolutely crazy about Elon throwing his heart out to the crowd and thanking them in gratitude, and people attributing it to some sort of salute, Bruce. So, a lot of people going a bit crazy about that, mate, hey?
Yeah, Elon's a Nazi, don't you know?
Apparently so. So if you listen to our mainstream media and people that don't tune into shows like ours and Cafe Locked Out and others, you'd be guilty for acknowledging the fact that and agreeing that Elon did a Nazi salute. But anyway, if you play a bit more than a 5-second clip, you might find out differently. So anyway,
Trump,
as most
Trump
people,
was a Nazi. Yep. Trump was a Nazi, so it shouldn't be any surprise if Musk, RFK Jr. is probably a Nazi too. I'll just wait and see. That'll get exposed sooner or later, won't it?
Yeah, 100%, mate. And guess what? We've got 4 years of this, Bruce. 4 years. Welcome to that. Anyway, Cobber, as most people know, we don't generally chat too much about what you're going to bring, so I don't generally know, and sometimes I gazump you, and sometimes I've got a little bit to bring beforehand, sometimes not. But today I'm just going to share something that's obviously happened here in South Australia for myself. There's so much to cover, but obviously you bring a lot, and we don't want to make we could make the show longer, but I thought we've also got to be off by 8 o'clock because, obviously Michael is coming on. Cafe Locked Out's got something else programmed at 8 o'clock, so we can't be on all night either, mate. So how about I just crack into it, and then you can you do your little bit, and hopefully the technology is kind to us as well. So hello to everybody tuning in. What do you reckon, mate?
That'd be great. Let's see how it works. And if you look on Cafe Locked Out, Michael's channel, he's a genuine TV channel. He's putting up hours of content every day. And thanks, Michael, for hosting us.
Yep, absolutely. So that's why we're cracking it out there, and all the other platforms. Obviously, Bruce and I, it goes to other platforms, but grateful for that opportunity. I think about 15,000 followers on the Cafe Locked Out Rumble channel, so quite considerable there, Michael. So well done. Anyway, let's move on, brother. Let's move on. So for those that might have been following me during the week, on Monday evening, I live streamed a Mount Barker Council meeting. Now, this isn't to be confused with the Adelaide Hills Council, because people that have been watching our show and myself know that I've been covering the Adelaide Hills Council, the great work of John and Edna Tate, and the council action group that's been pushing back in regards to the Adelaide Hills Council changing citizenship ceremony away from the 26th, which they were allowed to do because the federal government allowed that change. This is separate to the Adelaide Hills Council. So this is a bit, if people want to watch, this is Councillor Hewitt, who incidentally is also running as a candidate for One Nation in my electorate of Mayo. So I covered this on Monday night. It's uploaded to the Substack, so if people want to get a review of what happened there at the council meeting. It got quite heated with the mayor and Councillor Hewitt as well, and I did cover a few other little topics before that. So if people wanted to watch, they probably just have to, move forward a bit, maybe 40 odd minutes forward and get to that section there. But I covered quite a bit before that as well. But just on from that, obviously, I just wanted to play this because it's actually getting a bit of attention. So the advertisers run a piece on it, and also there was a stint on 5AA this morning. So, and well done to Graham Goodings for covering this sort of topic. I did listen to him this morning and heard him talking about Australia Day, and he was talking about Woolworths getting some pushback and all sorts of stuff there. So I just wanted to play this little bit of a clip, Bruce, before we get into your stuff, and I wanted to get your feedback after you listen to the mayor, and then obviously we've also got Mr. Pengelly, MP here in South Australia, chiming in as well as someone that called in. So I'm just going to play that quickly, and hopefully the sound will come through, and you can let me know if it doesn't. If it'll stream now.
Elected member of
Can you hear that okay?
not being committed to consult the community and present those results. And that's going to affect more than just Australia. That's going to affect everything that community want to communicate. If it doesn't go along with the council's narrative, will they just not listen to it?
Thank you for that, Rebecca. Well, let's get the Mayor's point of view for this. David Leach is the Mayor of Mount Barker District Council. Mayor, good morning to you.
Good morning, Graham. How are you?
Yeah, well, thanks. How do you react to what Rebecca Hewitt has said?
The way I react is to let everybody know that that poll does not represent the views of everybody in the Mount Barker District Council. The council is supporting two events on Australia Day. One of them is the Wallace Family Fun Day, and the other one is the Ruby Hunters Foundation Survival Day event. And they are running at different times on Australia Day. It allows for the diversity of the community's views to be able to exercise their choice on how they will spend Australia Day. So, for example, I will be presiding over the Australia Day Awards at Ockendorff House, and I'll be presiding over the citizenship, where some new Australians will sign the pledge to become Australians.
But why Rebecca Hewitt in the council meeting?
Because I have an obligation as the Mayor of the Council to ensure that no harm comes to anybody by the words and actions of other people.
Do you think that could have resulted in harm?
I know they have resulted in harm, Graham, because Aboriginal people who are my friends and people that I meet in the street say to me that they are harmed by those words. And it is my role and responsibility as the leader of the council to ensure that people are not hurt by other people's words.
If you're not taking into account the majority, or you don't know that, I mean, he's done a poll and you said that's not representative of the Mount Barker Council, but do you know what the feelings are of the Mount Barker residents?
Absolutely, because we do market research and we have a community plan, and the scorecard reveals that the community is strongly supportive of council being inclusive and acknowledging and celebrating the diversity. We do consult the public. A Facebook poll, which could be anybody in the world or anybody in Australia, of claim to be 1,000 people, is not representative of the 45,000 people who live here.
So you think the majority of the 45,000 people...
How you ask the question is the response you'll get in the poll.
So you believe that the majority of the 45,000 people are in agreement with you and your policy?
No, what I'm saying is that the majority of people support the council allowing for diversity and allowing for people to celebrate in different ways. I'm very sure that the majority of people are content with the council's policy, where we have a community event program where we sponsor many items, and this is just one of them.
David Leach, Mayor of Mount Barker, thank you for your time today. Frank Pangallo, Independent MLC. G'day, Frank, good morning to you.
Good morning, Graham, and Happy New Year to you and your listeners. Look, I don't have a position on the Survival Day per se. What I'm disturbed about, and this is an increasing trend that I'm starting to see coming from local governments, from councils, is this attempt to silence and censor councillors when they make some kind of comment or post something about a decision of council or something that council is doing. Now, in effect, what you're doing is interfering with the democratic process, because councillors, like parliamentarians, are elected to represent the people and be able to engage with their constituents. And what this mayor has done is, in effect, try to snuffle and stop this councillor from engaging with her constituents. As for the Facebook poll, what a ludicrous example he gave in terms of the fact that it doesn't sit with the council agenda. Well, so what, it doesn't? There's nothing to stop an elected representative from conducting a Facebook poll. I mean, I've done it. Imagine if I did it and then I get a call from the Premier saying to me, oh, your poll doesn't align with government agenda or policies, so we want you to pull it down.
Yeah, good point. Thanks for that, Frank.
Finding the perfect.
So there you go, mate. And this is, for those that don't know, this is Rebecca Hewitt. So she's also a candidate for One Nation for our seat, for my seat of Mayo. We'll be running against Rebecca Sharkey and Zane Bassick in the upcoming federal election. So for those and anybody that wants to get behind Rebecca, or anybody that's got an opinion about what's happened there, but ultimately, she was shut down during council by the mayor for, she was actually asked to give an apology about putting that poll up on the Facebook page. And according to the mayor there, who interjected multiple times, that wasn't the case. But from what I understand and believe, Rebecca has got evidence of that. I'm also hoping to catch up with Rebecca as a bit of a follow-up towards the end of the week as well. So I guess there's a few things that come out of there. And look, one of the things I guess that the mayor did bring up there is that, and we look at this as a state election and federal election, and when we elect people as a community, they basically say, well, we almost have a mandate to do what we do because the majority of people have put us into that place. But there's a few things that have come out of that. What did you pick up on from just that little bit of a discussion that happened there on that, Bruce? What's your thoughts?
Well, I used to be a resident of Mount Barker Council area, and I picked up first of all that the mayor said he's got a duty to ensure that nobody comes to any harm. Now, is this the same Mount Barker Council that hosted vaccination clinics in their council buildings in the main street of Mount Barker? And is it the same one that moved on protesters who were protesting outside of that, trying to let people know that the jabs were harmful? Is that the same no harm council we're talking about? And secondly, if he's there to ensure nobody gets harmed, well, what about all the decent people of European ancestry are harmed by the suggestion that their ancestors were genocidal maniacs? What about those people's harm? So you can't hide behind the nobody can be harmed thing. The council's job is to represent the people, same as any level of government. And if the mayor of Mount Barker Council wants to know what the people think, I just reference him to the Voice referendum, which I'm sure in Mount Barker Council area was in the high 60%, same as just about every other electorate, voting no. So, it's the usual thing. Council just says either we're acting on a complaint or blah, 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 but they refuse to go into details because the details aren't there. They've just chosen to do this and they're hiding behind all the woke words. Well, message to Mount Barker Council, in case you hadn't noticed, there was a seismic shift in the world that happened a couple of days ago, and it is going to filter all the way down to Australia and even to local council level. So perhaps you don't want to hitch your wagon too firmly to your old woke beliefs because a tsunami of change is coming.
Mm. And what do you think about the feelings? Yeah, feelings, eh? I'll tell you, I knew that would get you straight away. But anyway, look, there's a long way to go. There's a lot of pushback, as we know. A lot more is going to come out of this. The biggest thing is representatives being shut down, and we've seen this happen over the last few years. And look, I see a seismic shift as well from what happened, with what happened in America over there, and it is going to feed along through to Australia, and there's a lot of people that are going to get upset about that, which is mainly the people that have been trying to undermine everything else that we're doing, and that have kind of infiltrated, council and state government and federal politics and the bureaucracy. So there's a lot that's going to happen over the next few years. And look, we've got an election coming up, so things that we've got to focus on as well. So,
and we noticed last week that there is a tipping point. We're just about there where ordinary, decent people are not just going to smile politely and put up with this BS anymore. They're increasingly standing out saying, no, this isn't true, and you're not labelling me that way. We're not having it.
Yep, absolutely. Well, there you go, buddy. So that's my little input for the start of the show, and the rest is over to you now with your presentation of the goodies that you're going to bring to the audience this week, mate.
And let's see how we go with the new platform and the new internet service provider.
Yeah, no, well, it's all right. Well, I haven't seen any comments coming up on any of on anything yet, so we'll see if it's getting through to people.
Nothing from Musk yet.
Good on Elon. Yeah.
Okay, so there's the contents list for the week. We're going to run through our usual updates. We've got an update on fluoride from Australia. We've got an update from the Eat the Bugs people. We've got more on the story that claiming that climate change is making insurance unaffordable and therefore you must move. We've got more discussion on that. More evidence, as I've said in the past, that they are coming for your super. And then to finish out, two big worldwide events. One is the ceasefire in Gaza, and I'm going to analyse that and ask, what is a ceasefire and what does this mean? And does this mean the war's over? Is this something we should be celebrating? And then finally, from the last day and a half, the Donald somehow survived to be inaugurated, despite the massive forces of darkness that have been arrayed against him for many years. He's been inaugurated, and true to his word, he's hit the ground running and issued a large number of presidential directives, which indicate the direction that his new government is going to head. And I'm going to look at some of those which might be relevant in the case of Australia.
Yeah, absolutely. Great stuff.
So first off, from the Eat the Bugs people, quick update. They seeded this story into the Australian during the week, and it really is suggesting to us that eating meat is a privilege, because the question asked in the story is, how much will people pay for the privilege of eating meat? Now, we've discussed this previously. I've been on what's called a proper human diet, thanks Ken Berry, for 5 years, and my health has never been better. I've learnt that humans are primarily carnivores and that plant foods are adjuncts or non-starvation fallbacks. But the real food that humans are designed to eat and need to eat is meat. Like it or not, that's a fact. That's your anatomy and physiology. And yet they're increasingly attacking that. And this story is attacking it from the line of trying to tell us that it's a privilege. And note the bait and switch there, because remember, these are the Eat the Bugs people, and yet the question isn't telling you that you should be eating the bugs instead of your meat. It's questioning whether you should be switching to a plant-based diet. And that's obviously much more acceptable to people than switching to a bug-based diet, which is what the World Economic Forum wants. So that's called a bait and switch. And here's yet another story which is seeded out just to introduce the idea to people that, meat's not a necessity. Maybe it's a bit of a privilege. Maybe it's a luxury. Maybe it's something that, you really can't justify. Okay, next quick update, the fluoride update. And we've discussed in the past how fluoride follows a lot of the same ethical problems as the COVID mandates did, because when you put fluoride in the drinking water, you're effectively mandating people to consume it, because most people don't even know that they are, and it gets into everything, gets into foods that have been manufactured using that water and so on. And so for decades, we were told that fluoride was good for us and that justified mandating it. Does that business model sound familiar? But here's the point. This story asks, when it comes to fluoride, who gets to decide what's best for our children? Okay, whose decision is it? And at the end of the day, if you're putting it in the water, you're making the decision for those people, because you can't take it out of the water. And in fact, most of the time you're consuming it and you don't even know. And I make the point that there are serious health concerns over fluoride. And even if there weren't, it is utterly unnecessary to put it in the water. If you believe that fluoride improves dental health, and again, when you look into the science of that, that's as questionable as just about every other holy cow of medicine, vaccines being another example. When you actually look at the evidence, okay, is this a boon to health? It's actually pretty shaky. But let's say I do believe it and I do want fluoride for the health of my teeth and my children's teeth. The way it works is what's called topical. You put it in your toothpaste and you brush it on your teeth. That's how it works. It is unnecessary and ineffective to drink it. So there is no justification for mandating it in the drinking water when you could instead give people the choice. You want to take fluoride, you want your kids to take fluoride, buy your fluoride toothpaste, you get the choice. Mandating it by putting it in the water takes away that choice.
Yep. Yeah, just like everything else. And they want to put bloody mosquitoes out in Queensland, don't they? Oh, mate, another Bill Gates initiative, I think it is, isn't it? Or, you know, just for the greater good.
For the greater good, Mark.
Für das Allgemeinwohl.
All right. Now, what about an insurance update? In the last couple of episodes, we've talked about insurance, and one of the things they're telling people to get them out of these areas they want them out of under the guise of climate change is they're telling them that they won't be able to afford insurance, and in many places they're engineering it so they can't afford insurance. So, for example, in the LA fires, prior to that, they pushed the people's risk of loss of home in a fire up multiple orders of magnitude with poor forestry management, building codes that favoured wood, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then when the insurers said, well, the risk's gone up, so the premium's gone up, California law wouldn't let the insurers put the premium up. They capped. And as a result, the insurers just went, well, we're not staying here. You know, we're not going to make a loss. So they left the market. So that's a scam as well. Nothing is uninsurable. You know, the only question is what is the price? And if they increase the risk with government policy and then prevent the insurer from raising the premium, then they're effectively banning insurance.
Yeah, well, mess around and find out, eh?
And that's ported over into Australia as well, because there was a story this week on the ABC telling us that 1 in 10 properties will be uninsurable in the next decade due to climate change risk analysis modelling. So we're not going to be able to afford insurance for our properties in the future because the climate risk is going up. And how do we know that? Because modelling told us. Well, what have I got to say about that? First of all, models are not data. Models are simplified representations of the same thing. They have a limited number of parts that go into them, and they often have a predetermined outcome as to what's going to be the result when you put all the pieces together. So climate change modelling is often directed at a certain answer, and that's true here as well. They're telling us we won't be able to afford insurance based on assumptions that they put in. And I say again, nothing's uninsurable. The only question is the price.
Yeah. Pretty hard if you lock it in, though. If the government interferes and decides to lock it in, eh? Then
well, if the government price caps, and I'll talk about that in a second, but models are basically making future predictions. And as Yogi Berra said, it's really hard to make predictions about the future. Although having said that, most of the climate models don't even work if you run them backwards. They don't even tell you what happened that we know happened. So that's, they can't even predict the past. But let me recap again. This is how insurance works. You pay the insurance company a fee to take on your risk. And the company works out what that risk of loss is, and they price it accordingly. So they look at how much the average dollar loss insuring you is going to be in a year. They add an admin fee and a profit fee, and they add them together, and that's called your premium. So let's say my premium really, or my risk really did go up 5 times, pick a number, here in Western Victoria. Then in a free market, all the insurance company's going to do is say, well, your premium's got to go up 5 times, and I get to choose whether I want to do that. And I can shop around in the market and work out, who gives me the best price. But if the government then says, it's going to be 5 times more expensive, but you're not allowed to charge it, they're basically taking insurance away from you. So government intervention is actually taking insurance away.
Yep.
And that's a way of getting you out of your house, obviously.
Managed retreat.
Managed retreat, indeed. And here's an interesting part. A bit further on in the story, there are a couple of other things I thought I might read to you. One is it said, there is no doubt an increasing proportion of rural and regional Australia is becoming uninsurable under the current system. Well, why rural and regional areas? Why are they the ones where the losses are going to be so great that the insurance companies can't stay in that market? Because that doesn't make any sense to me. And the reason it doesn't make any sense to me is reference the Grampians fires. We discussed last week. The Grampians fires were 77,000 hectares in Western Victoria, and they destroyed, I think, 3 houses and about 10 sheds. The LA fires were about 1/7 the size, and yet they destroyed tens of thousands of houses. So why the difference? Well, the difference is because the Grampians fires were in a rural area where there weren't any structures, whereas the LA fires ran into the suburbs of LA where there were tens of thousands of buildings that could be lost. So, and when you think about it, whenever you get a natural disaster, the greatest losses are always in the cities because that's where the people are and that's where the structures are. So to tell us that climate change means we need to move out of the rural areas and into the cities is a lie. It doesn't make any sense. And just think about what you see in Australia. Every time a hailstorm goes through New South Wales, we only hear about it when it goes through Sydney and destroys 1,000 or 10,000 cars. If it goes through Gunnedah, it doesn't matter if it drops the same number of hailstorms, the losses are far less. So it's a lie to tell us that climate risk means we have to move into the cities because the cities are more concentrated risk. And it's the same for floods. The biggest losses in floods are when they occur in major cities like Brisbane. And how often do we see that? If there's a flood in Great Western with 300 people, that's the limit to your loss. So it doesn't make any sense to say that concentrating all the people and all their at-risk assets in a single small localised place, let's call it a 15-minute city, is going to solve the problem of insurance losses going up because of climate change. Even if it was true, then you want to distribute your risk, not concentrate it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all one big scam.
And as dear old Charlie Munger said, look, this doesn't make sense to me. And if something doesn't make sense, it's because you don't understand the incentives. And Charlie Munger, who was the other half of Warren Buffett and Berkshire Hathaway, just died this year at age 99. He said, show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome. So why is it that they want to move us out of our rural areas and concentrate us in cities if it's not because of insurance losses? well, maybe it's because of this. Maybe they actually want us corralled in a place where they can take away our freedom and our assets. Maybe it'd be really helpful to have us all living in suburbs downwind of a fire. So they could take away all those assets from us. And remember, you can't insure them. And we're halfway to the old, you will own nothing and be happy. Although, as I often said to Klaus, I already own a lot of stuff and I'm already happy. So your program ain't working for me, Klaus.
Yeah, Roger. The climigration, don't you know? We should all make Klaus unhappy. I'd like to see Klaus unhappy. Apparently, he's a bit unhappy in Davos this year. Didn't they just have Davos and he was pushing home his, it's for the greater good. It's, we've got to work together in a globalized way and to hell with sovereignty of nations making their own path.
I didn't see whether he got invited to Trump's inauguration, but he might be a bit sulky if he didn't.
Oh yeah, good luck. He might have he might have been sitting there like bloody old mate Joe Biden, who had to persevere Trump's speech while sitting right next to. I mean, credit to him that he came along and sat there and listened to that bit of spray. But anyway, there you go.
He might have had a bit of white noise going on in the earpiece at the time, but. Back to our story. So the story we were discussing is they're telling us that the climate risks are going up in rural areas. We can't afford the insurance, so we're going to have to move into these safe, let's call them 15-minute cities. And further on in the discussion, and this is about, insurance becoming unaffordable, there are actually two experts quoted in it. One said that we could keep it affordable, keep premiums down, by government regulations, including caps on premiums. Now, we've just discussed that. That's called a price control. And price controls create shortages, not cheap goods. So if the company can't afford to sell you insurance at the government-mandated price, they don't take a loss and sell you cheap insurance. They go out of business and you get no insurance. And as we heard, there were tens of thousands of people in that boat in Los Angeles. The other expert, however, ringed below, Dr. Mallon, said he disagreed. He said that these sorts of pooling arrangements created incentives for people to keep building homes in high-risk areas, and premium caps sent insurers out of the market. So that's one of the two experts there who actually knows what he's talking about. So if you subsidise people's risk by keeping their premiums lower than they really are, then you encourage them to take on that risk. And then, of course, the insurers go bust or leave, so they've all got no coverage. We've discussed that.
Yeah. So I guess the same could be said then with the rental market, how they like a lot of states are putting caps on property owners, restricting being able to lift their prices on their home.
Yep. And what that does is that creates a shortage of rental properties. Because landlords can do all sorts of things with the property. They could live in it themselves. They could redevelop it into a shop. They could tear it down, whatever. And if you make it harder for them to make a profit based on the existing use by putting a price cap on it, it doesn't mean they go, oh, damn, I'll have to rent this to the tenant for, at a loss. They just go, sorry, not happening. I'll go out of business myself. And Milton Friedman, one of my favourite economists, has talked about that. And I'll quote what he said. Economists may not know how to run the economy, but they know how to create shortages or gluts simply by regulating prices below the market or artificially supporting them above. So if you regulate allowable prices below actual prices, the goods don't get sold. They go away. And that's true of insurance price caps, or rental price caps, or petrol price caps, or whatever.
Well, really, the key is creating an environment where everybody can be competitive and you don't stifle, competition and bureaucratic red tape. Yeah.
And I was listening to a podcast today where a company which was trying to build some infrastructure in California eventually gave up and moved to Nigeria because the business environment was more permissive than it was in California.
Yeah, well, makes sense, doesn't it? Well, I think a lot of our manufacturing left our country too, but that might have been by design as well.
Righto. So having said that price caps only create shortages, what are the Californians doing? That's Gavin Newsom, the California governor. And he said this week that in order to stop price gouging, they're going to put protections in place to make rebuilding of all the destroyed homes more affordable. In other words, we're going to put price caps on what builders can charge. And as discussed a week ago, you're going to have a massive demand for builders in LA, and their costs are going to be higher because they're going to have to move there. They're going to have to put themselves up in some sort of accommodation, which is going to be expensive because of the losses. They've got a whole regulatory overload. They've got to take away toxic house residue that's been burned down. So the building costs are higher. And if you want to get more builders to come in to address that, you've got to make it easier for them to charge higher prices. If you don't, if you just say, well, you're a builder, but you can only charge normal rates in LA, then the builder who's in San Francisco who's thinking about going down there for a year and making good money, he said, no, bugger it, I'll just stay in San Francisco. So again, if you put a cap on the price, you just end up with a shortage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, Australians wouldn't be that silly. I know the governor of California is that silly. Now, Australian politicians and economists would never try to cap prices, you know, to make consumers happy, would they? Because they would know that that would create shortages. So they wouldn't be stupid enough to do that. Or would they, Mark Butler? So I don't know if you know in Australia, but every year when the health insurers decide what their premiums need to be based on their claims experience the previous year, they actually have to apply to the government to be allowed to put their prices up. So the government already controls the price of health insurance. And in this story this week, Mark Butler said no to the health insurers and said, you're not allowed to put your prices up as much as you'd like. Now, the market should determine that. You know, I can go to Medibank Private or Mutual Community or you name it. I'm a consumer. I can go to the person who gives me the best price. Not up to the government to tell me what my premium is. But here, that's exactly what they're trying to do. And guess what's going to happen if they try and do that?
Well,
here's the answer. Well, here's the background. The minister must approve annual premium rises. And the next thing, it's my responsibility as health minister to ensure that any insurance premium increase is justified and proportionate. So there you go. You are not the client of Mutual Community or pick a health insurer. You're not an adult. You're not allowed to decide whether you want to buy the insurance or not. No, that's up to the health minister, Mark Butler. He's going to negotiate on your behalf without knowing anything about you. He's going to negotiate prices for you, and you ain't going to get it right, obviously. But anyway, he thinks he'll make consumers happy by telling the insurers that they can't put their prices up. Now, the industry's responded by saying, well, this is crazy because the industry will go broke, and it will. Like I've said, they have real costs. They need to make a profit and have an admin fee on top of the risk. And it's up to them to decide what it is. And it's up to you as the consumer to shop around and find the cheapest price. If they can't raise their prices to the point where they're making a profit, they will go out of business. They are not charities. And the health industry said that their costs went up 8 to 10% last year. And that, by the way, is the inflation rate. And yet their premiums only went up 3%. So if that continues for more than a year or two, all those insurers go out of business. They are not charities. They are not there to sell a good at a loss. No business is.
Yeah. Well, here's a thought too, and we've discussed it heaps, and I'm just throwing it out there, and obviously can be chipped for that. But, you know, ultimately, if we weren't being forced to go towards electric vehicles and insurance companies weren't having to pay out more claims on burning EVs, or, you know, if let's say the government hadn't have, you know, forced a medical procedure on the population and people are just getting sicker for every additional dose of said medicine, then, you know, maybe health premiums wouldn't have to go up. I don't know, Bruce. I just throw it out there, but, you know, I could be wrong, but, you know, there you go.
At the same time as the Australian population's health is cratering, which means more and more demand is being placed on the public health system, the government is trying to destroy the private health system. And I don't know if you've noticed, but if you go down to an emergency department on a Friday night, it will be full to the aisles with broken people, morbidly obese, drug addicts, drunks, you name it. That's the state of the public, and that's why the public health system is falling over. You will never be able to put enough resources in to fix that problem because you're not looking at the root cause. So if you want to be a responsible person and opt out of that and say, look, I'll just buy my own private insurance, same as you do for your car or your house or whatever, the government's in the process of putting regulations in place which are actually going to take that option away from you. Thank you for keeping me safe, government.
Yeah, yes. We'll make you safer.
And again, like I said, our economists and our politicians would never be stupid enough to put price controls in, would they? Because they know that price caps create shortages. Well, this story was in the media yesterday from Victoria, and it said petrol price cap plan announced by the Victorian government. And I looked at that and I went, oh, you've got to be kidding me. Although it's not actually as bad as I thought. When they said petrol price caps, I thought they were going to put a limit on what retailers are allowed to charge when they sold their petrol. And like I said, if they're told they have to sell it for less than they can profitably do so, they'll go out of business. There won't be any selling. But in fact, this is different. This just said that you're not allowed to change your price more than once a day. So the night before, every service station's got to notify the government what tomorrow's price is, and that then goes on an app and lets people shop around. Now, that sounds great, but that's just yet another regulatory layer that's added on to business. You know, I'm an adult. Why can't I drive around and go, that's the cheapest place, I'll pull in there? I did that today. Now, why do I need the government to intervene in that with all the regulatory costs and overlays and the loss of agility? It doesn't help.
Yeah, and we've got those apps now too. There's a heap of apps competing, I guess, another way to talk about cheap petrol prices in different suburbs and different areas and so forth. You know, people should just be able to, you know, shop around for their servos and, you know, support those that are good, you know, doing a good deal and everything else like that. I just wanted to chuck this message in from Barry from over in WA. Barry, we have a subsidised sickness industry, but managed food on the basis of down on price. The cheap processed food like materials sold by the corporations causes much of the sickness. We need to get back to eating foods produced by local farmers that haven't been moved all around the world with fossil fuels. And a bit of a plug there, Barry, because I've been speaking to Barry over there in WA. He's also one of the newer reps on Donnybrook Ballingup Community Radio. So good on you, Baz.
Look, we need to go, I think, even further than that. We need people to have informed consent about what they're eating. And as adults, that doesn't mean somebody tells me that. It's my job to find out. You know, if the proper human diet is fat and protein and limited carbohydrates, I'm an adult. It's my job to find out that and act on it. I can't grizzle that the supermarkets are just selling processed, Mark. I need to find something better somewhere else. And I'm an adult. If I want to eat cheap processed, Mark, that's my right too. But the point is, I should not be rescued from the consequences. You know, if I end up weighing 180 kilos, diabetic, and my feet are dropping off because I've spent my whole life eating ice cream, Doritos, and processed carbohydrates, that's my problem. The only reason that society is breaking down is because it's being generalized to other people. You know, I am paying for the bad decisions of others, which means they cannot self-correct. In the olden days, if I got too fat to work, I couldn't work, I got no money, and I got thin again. Nowadays, if I get too fat to work, I get given a house, I get given an electric scooter, I get given lifts, I get given a care package on the NDIS. It's all reinforcing failure rather than self-correcting based on consequences.
Yeah, 100%. And it comes down to quality information, because we've talked about it often, and you've presented it often about the upside down food pyramid and what we've been fed in regards to information and media. And it's about listening to those alternative voices which have been demonized, obviously for the industry that's looking to keep people in a situation what you just outlaid there. But you're right, it comes down to choice and control. We're adults, we should be able to make those choices based on full informed consent and correct information.
And we should be allowed to make bad choices too. But nobody else should subsidise the consequences.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, let's just circle back to the economics here. And we've talked about this in the past, but every time there's a disaster, the prices of things in the disaster area goes up. And that's always portrayed in the media as a bad thing. It's not a bad thing, it's a good thing, because it's a way of rationing scarce goods. And so in this story from LA, it says, the greedy landlords are basically more than doubling their rental prices because there's a shortage of rental properties, because a lot of people got burnt out of their houses. And that sounds terrible, because the greedy landlords will be making a profit. But the reason prices have to rise when there's a shortage is because it does what's called bring on new supply. So in this case, if I step forward one, here's a response to that in a tweet. And it's basically saying a furnished Bel Air home, Bel Air's in the LA suburbs, went on Zillow today for $29,000 a month, when a few months ago it was roughly half that. And you've got an agent saying to a client whose house had been listed and was then off the market, they said, put your house back on as a rental listing because the prices are better. So that's exactly an example of how rising prices increase the supply of goods. So, yeah, you might not like the idea that things cost more when there's a shortage, but as they say, the cure for high prices is high prices, and the cure for low prices is low prices, because both of them affect supply.
Yeah. Yeah.
Righto. Another quickie, not easy being green, lithium battery fire. And this was in the Adelaide Hills. I don't know. The story was that a Hills family has lost their business when an uninsured workshop was ravaged by a fire caused by a lithium battery. Did you hear about that? Do you know where that was in the Hills?
No, I didn't. Where was it, Bruce? Yeah.
I don't know myself, so I don't pay the advertiser money to read their stories. So I can only report on the précis there. But look, every week I could give you multiple stories about lithium batteries burning houses down. It's yet another one of the downsides of the electric revolution that people are not being told about. And you ask any fire services, their proportion of structure fires caused by lithium batteries has skyrocketed. It's gone from virtually none to dozens or hundreds per year in any major city in Australia.
Absolutely. Yeah, it keeps going. It's going to get worse because there's only a very small percentage out there currently, and they want to push everybody, like how many billions of vehicles are on the road around the world?
Everybody's got to go electric, and it's got to be your chainsaws, you name it. Everything's going to be electric.
Yeah.
All right, moving on a bit. I've said in the past that they're coming for your super, and they are, and every week we see an example of that. And this story was saying that Jim Chalmers has basically failed on this occasion to get Senate approval for a raid on your super account by way of tax. The raid was painted in the terms that taxes are always painted. Don't worry, it's only going to affect the rich people. And so in this case, they were trying to thin into the wedge this by saying, we're going to put a higher tax on super accounts if they're worth more than 3 million. Which, most people go, that's all right. That's not going to hurt us, is it? And Leona, thank you very much for saying that Business Destroyed was in Nairn. I used to be a member of the CFS in the Hyson group, and so Nairn was part of our patch. So there you go, very local, wasn't it?
It was pretty
So
local.
Jim Chalmers tried to raid the super of only of the greedy, stinking rich people, and he failed. And that's good that he failed. But let's look at a bit of history. When income tax came in, both in Australia and America, was over 100 years ago. And in both cases, it only applied to the very rich. And it started at a very low rate. So, for example, in Australia, it started off at 7% of your income. And it didn't kick in until you're at the very top of the income scale anyway. So that tiny little tax that's only going to affect the rich, 100 years ago, hardly anybody paid it, and the worst you paid was 7%. Fast forward to now, everybody pays it, and it's 37% at the top marginal rate. And of course, it's not only income tax; they tax you all other times as well with GST and other taxes as well.
Wow, it's crazy, isn't it? Eh?
Well, that's what they do to you. They sell it to you as a margin case, and then they just keep changing it. Basically, I've said that. That's basically say that it all starts at a very
It's
low
interesting.
rate.
I did chat to, and again, in regards to super, I talked to Michael Arbon, who's a great South Australian as well and knows his stuff around finance as well. And we talked about that bit of super. And I said, 6 or 7 years ago, I did a bit of a video because I was a bit frustrated about not being able to use my super to throw into my own home as an owner-occupied self-managed super fund, and knock that off. And it's because it's all just because it's regulated and there isn't choice and control of what I can do with super. I mean, how many Australians are sitting on, over 200K in super that would love to chuck that into their mortgage? You could still, if they didn't want to, loosen the regulation, they could still kind of say, well, okay, you can't access it until you're, 65. But imagine how much interest most people would save by being able to knock 200K off their mortgage, they're transferring their super into an offset account, But of course, they don't even give you that. They want you to have it in the super funds that they can use and do whatever they want with it.
And I'm just about to talk about why. And I fell down that trap myself because when I was an SA Health employee, I had compulsory SSS super through the government. And so I went and set up a self-managed super about best part of 10 years ago with the intent of buying precious metals and Bitcoin because I thought they were better investments than what the government was offering me. And SSS refused to release me my money. They said, no, we're going to keep it. Thank you. This is at the same time as private businesses were required to assist you in running a self-managed super. Government employees were prohibited from having it. So SSS, who was holding my money, refused to let me do with it what I wanted. And like I say, if I'd have bought Bitcoin and precious metals 10 years ago, then I wouldn't have been waiting this long to get Starlink in. I'd have had multiple dishes. My super fund would have gone 100 times better than it did under their management.
Yeah, so they're claiming that they can manage your money better than what you can. So, if you're an astute person, and obviously they've gypped you on that occasion, haven't they?
Absolutely. Now, as I said, Jim Chalmers tried to get a raid on high-value super accounts by increasing the tax and was stymied. So almost immediately we're seeing all the second-order stories about how they're going to do it anyway. Just a bit like the old voice thing, we're just going to do it anyway. So this story came out from the Grattan Institute, and the Grattan Institute is a bit like the Pons Institute. They're the research firm you go to with the answer in before you even start. And this story from them said Australia needs government help to spend their super. And if you read into the story, apparently it's all too hard to spend our super. And so there's a lot of people whose super accounts are either going up over time in retirement or failing to fall fast enough. So people apparently just can't get around to spending their money. So they need government help. Now, somewhat schizophrenically at the same time, they're also telling us that there's a risk that we'll run out of our money before we die. So the average Australian can't manage to spend their super while they're alive, and yet Ambos and Fireys are spending too much and they're going to run out of it. So they're sort of contradicting themselves in the same week, aren't they? And here's another problem with superannuation, is that superannuation is being used for generational wealth transfer. And what that story was about, it says people are dying with money still in their super accounts. And that's terrible, because that means that their descendants are inheriting that money, shock horror, and it's not meant to do that. That's not what super's for. Newsflash, super was my money, compulsorily invested against my will for decades. And when I finally get my hands on it, it's my money. You know, if I want to give it to my kids in future, that's my choice. It's not a problem that my kids inherit some of it because I don't spend it fast enough. But the stories just kept coming. So this must have been a push. There must have been, you know, a memo sent out during the week. So this story said that superannuation is just too complicated, and it would be much better if we just got a guaranteed government income instead. It'd be so much simpler for everybody.
Oh, that'd be lovely, eh? Just look after.
And what they want you to do is they want you to roll all your super fund back into the government and let them manage it for you and pay you a pension. So in the 40 or so years from when I started to when I ended work, we've gone full circle. From the Hawke-Keating era when superannuation was introduced, and that was part of your salary package. When it first came in, it was instead of a pay rise. So they forced part of your salary into a super account where it was invested for decades, and then you got it back at the end, and it was yours. You know, you're in charge of spending it. But now that we've got to the end of it, what they want to do is go, oh, we want all that money. You know, that money that you've had taken off you during your working life and put into your own shoebox for your own retirement. The government wants it back now, and we'll just give you a pension anyway. So it's basically the same thing, right? So it's circled all the way around. Now, meanwhile, what do you think is going to happen? The government's going to invest that money for you. Now, we've seen what the government's priorities are, haven't we? They're going to invest your money in things like this, a green energy revolution. They're going to invest it in burning wind turbines, in solar farms that get smashed, etc., etc.
Yep, absolutely. Just going to reach out to Jono. I can see you comment there on Rumble. So yeah, your chats are coming through. It's just not many people in the chat at the moment. So a bit more chatter on Facebook at the moment, but Rumble not so much. So just letting you know, Jono, I saw your chat come through.
How are you, Jono Gill? This is our first live stream based on our upgraded technology, so there might not be as much visibility on it as perhaps we'll get later on.
Yeah, that's it. Absolutely.
So I've put, this is a slide I've used in the past. This is how they're going to steal your super. They're going to create a financial crisis, real or imagined, and trust me, there'll be plenty of real ones. They're going to get everybody very worried. Think of all the COVID fear porn. Then they're going to tell you that in response to the overwhelming anxiety out there in the community and the desire for safety, the government is going to roll all those sort of dangerous, vulnerable private accounts. They're going to roll them all together into a single safe government guaranteed fund. Then they're going to waste those funds. Hardly need to put that bit in. And then they're just going to pay you a pension anyway with printed money, which is what they've been doing for decades anyway. So basically, the only thing that's going to change here is they're going to take all the money out of your super. That's what they want to do. That's how they're going to do it. If they can't tax it away or inflate it away, they're going to create a financial crisis. They're going to roll it all into a central, safe government fund, and then they're going to blow it. Same as they do, a bit like they do with a future fund.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and there was a lot of people pulling back on that, wasn't there? Wasn't even I think it was BlackRock was pulling away from the DEI kind of stuff. But there is people pulling back on this whole renewable stuff as well because they see it's an absolute failure.
Well, I'm betting now with the direction change in the States that, there's going to be a few people jumping off that horse when they worked out that, it's not the gravy train that it was hoped to be.
Yep.
Anyway, two big world stories this week to finish off. And the first one was the ceasefire between Hamas and Israel, which was announced in Gaza. And there was a huge amount of celebrating and people dancing in the streets, and the hostages are coming home and all that. And people seem to think that this ceasefire means that the war is over. And I hate to tell you as a historian that it doesn't mean that at all, because it doesn't meet the criteria for the end of a war. So historically, wars end when one side is obliterated. They end when their leadership is dead, when Adolf Hitler is face down in the gutter, when the Reichstag is in ruin. That's when they end, when your enemy has no ability to continue fighting. And that indeed is the Reichstag in Germany, in Berlin, in 1945. So that's when the Germans surrendered at the end of the Second World War. And similarly for Japan. Japan soldiered on for another 3 months or so, I think, until August 45. And when they surrendered, it was because their towns are also completely in ruins. And in fact, not only the two that were atom bombed, but pretty much every other substantial city had been devastated by firebombing anyway. So the major protagonists, Germany and Japan, were devastated. Their leadership was dead and the people couldn't fight anymore. And after that, they didn't just, declare a ceasefire and all go back home. There followed a long period of changes within those defeated territories. So Germany was divided for nearly 50 years into East and West before recently reuniting. And Japan was occupied for 7 years. So they had military occupations for a long time afterwards. They didn't just declare a ceasefire and leave it at that. Because when you declare a ceasefire and leave it at that, it's not the end of the war, despite what this story said about the Korean War. See, when the Korean War ended in 1953, it did not end. What they had was an armistice or a ceasefire. That's not a surrender. That's not a defeat of one side. An armistice is where you stop fighting. So a truce or a ceasefire, basically. And so, 70 years later, that war is still in existence. It's just been suspended. Troops still face off between North and South Korea across that border 70 years later. So suspending fighting in of itself does not end a war. A war ends when one side is utterly defeated and cannot go on. And as I've said before, words matter. So let's look at some words. So what's the definition of an armistice? That's where opposing sides stop fighting for a certain time, also known as a truce. And a ceasefire is pretty much the same, a temporary suspension of fighting. So neither of those things are an end to the war, if you notice. They're just a temporary cessation of hostilities. And that's what they've got in Gaza between Israel and Hamas. Because even if the fighting stops, the problem doesn't. There's a reason that Israel has repeated conflicts with the Islamic nations around it. And that's because it is a tiny Jewish enclave surrounded by hundreds of millions of Muslims whose instruction manual, the Quran, says that Israel has to be wiped off the face of the map. So that is the problem. And simply stopping fighting for a while doesn't solve that problem. And I regard these as irreconcilable differences. Simply stopping fighting in Gaza doesn't affect the fact that Israel wants to be there and the Palestinians want to be there. And these are two positions which cannot both exist at the same time. So this will cause conflict to continue to reappear in the Middle East until it's solved. And I've been criticised for saying this, but as a practical person, I only see one solution. This war only ends when Israel is no longer in the Middle East. I can't see any other solution. Israel doesn't have the combat power to kill every Muslim in the hundreds of millions that surround it. And so the problem will go on. I don't see Israel winning.
It's It's a tricky one, isn't it? It's a real tricky one because I've commented plenty of times about where I see it, and definitely can be pulled apart as well. Is that the actions of Palestine and the Israel state, and I'm not talking about Jews in general, or Palestinians or Muslims in general. Same with Ukraine and Russia, right? I see this as a much bigger play of fingers and puppet masters affecting all of that. You only have to look at the military-industrial complex. My personal view is, and people can chew me apart, is that all these wars is at the behest of the people that are pulling the strings, And I see the same with we heard about the AFP today. I see the same with the attacks on the Jewish, buildings and so forth in Victoria. We're seeing that now. There's talk now that these people are being funded. That the people that are doing this are being funded from international bad actors, and it doesn't surprise me because I see a lot of this stuff is all to agitate and continue to keep people divided. And I think people need to look past the overall people, the majority of people, and look that there's some very bad actors that are instigating a lot of this. That's just my view. I'm sort of, obviously still unpacking a lot, and I've still got a lot to learn, but I see it as an agitation from bad actors.
100%. And, before people accuse me of supporting one or other side, I'm making no judgment as to either side being morally or ethically right. I'm really pointing out the strategic situation. And the strategic situation, it's like a marriage. You've got irreconcilable differences between the parties, and their representatives are milking them for as much money as they can, and it's in their interest to keep it going. So Israel is an enormous market for American weaponry, and Palestine is an enormous market for guilt and sympathy for the entire Islamic world. And both larger entities benefit from that, and the real victims here are the Palestinians and the Jews in Israel. But unfortunately, Israel is a tiny country, has no strategic depth. Every conflict is an existential conflict. As Netanyahu said, basically, if Israel lays down their weapons, there'll be no Israel. If the Arabs lay down their weapons, there'll be no war. And that's just a fact. But like all irregular wars, you can't defeat your enemy by bombing them back to the Stone Age. And Gaza has been utterly devastated, not just this time, multiple times. Beirut's been bombed, you name it. There's still people crawling around in the wreckage. They've still got historical memories. They're all traumatized. Those people are all set up for a lifetime of hating Israel and wanting another go. And that's just the way it is. And bombing them doesn't change that. You never get rid of all of them. And for that reason, I don't think the current peace, and it's not peace, it's a ceasefire, I don't think it'll be durable. Even if there's no more fighting for another 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, it will recur because it's nothing more than a ceasefire and the problem hasn't gone away.
Yeah, and there's ultimate hate continually being agitated from other nations around it as well, not just those two nations, but others around them. Yep.
And imagine if you wanted to solve this, if you actually cared about your kids and their future and not your historical grievances, what about trying this? What about you say to your kids, look, bad things happen in the past, but I want you to look forward to the future. Didn't happen to you, don't hold any grudges. Now, if both sides said that, there wouldn't need to be any historical reasons for repeating this conflict in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. How do you benefit your kids? Say you're in Palestine. How do you benefit your kids by saying the Israelis have been doing terrible things to us for generations? You have to go and get them. Wouldn't it be better to say to your kids, gee, you're lucky you're born now, not generations ago when bad things happened to your ancestors? And that flows across into the whole, Indigenous grievance industry as well. Instead of gifting your new kids guilt and grievances that's going to harm them for their lives, what about just saying to them, geez, you're really lucky you're born after that? Wouldn't that be a better basis to get on with?
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. What was it? We got a comment here from New Sports. When was Israel's last two-state solutions proposed?
Look, I don't recall, and there's been a number of them, but at the end of the day, Islamic forces in the Middle East don't want a two-state solution. I mean, Gaza effectively was a two-state solution, but rockets always come out of it.
Hmm.
You know, two-state solutions don't work with implacable enemies next door to each other. Ultimately, one of them's got to go.
Yep. And October 7th was obviously the straw that broke the camel's back.
And that's a whole other rabbit hole. And I don't believe for a moment that was a surprise attack pulled off against the most sophisticated security apparatus in the world. There's a lot that stinks there. And I don't for a minute doubt that the Israeli government allowed that to happen. That was a lie hop. They let it happen on purpose. That was not a surprise attack. They knew that was coming. They allowed it to happen for their own domestic purposes.
Yeah, there's a lot of commentators speaking into that as well.
Okay, and to finish this topic, I'll just remind you of the asymmetric victory conditions for asymmetric wars. So in guerrilla wars, you've got one side with very low-tech weaponry and not much combat power. In this case, that's the Palestinians. And you've got the other side with very high-end weaponry, which should be capable of winning a conventional war without any problems. But the reason that the stronger force struggles to win in this situation, you know, why can't Israel defeat Gaza? The reason is because the victory conditions are different. Asymmetric wars have asymmetric victory conditions. So guerrillas or irregulars, they win by not losing. So by surviving, the Palestinians win. And that's what this story says. You know, we've had a 2-day ceasefire. We've got Gaza, which is rubble from end to end, and Hamas is back in charge within a day. So Hamas has persisted and therefore won. So guerrillas win by not losing, regulars lose by not winning. And the fact that Hamas has come out of the ground and they are still there, despite everything that the Israelis did to them, means that at this point Hamas is winning, which is why this ceasefire is not the end of the war.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate. Absolutely, and it's unfortunate, like you say, Hamas has emerged from underground, but meanwhile, you know, all those, and it's the collateral damage is always the innocent men, women, and children that are caught up in this, and they're the ones that you know, I ultimately pray for. And no one wins in these situations apart from the instigators of it.
Yeah, and that's the weapon for the Hamas leadership. The more hospitals that are bombed, the more dead babies that are carried through the streets for, you know, photographers to photograph. That's how they win. That's what their weapon is. Those pictures gives them world influence and sympathy. Destroying the hospital is a win for Hamas. It's not a win for Israel. You know, leveling Gaza is a win for Hamas, not for Israel. And for that reason.
Yep.
Righto, on to the final big story of the week. And that, of course, is that Donald Trump managed to survive to inauguration, and he is now the 47th US president. And here are some of the highlights of what he promises for his new administration. And this is hugely important for Australia and the rest of the Western world, because as goes the US, so goes the world. So on the first day, he issued, I think, best part of 100 executive orders, and they're presidential decrees. Now, they're not absolute, and there are ways that the Congress can defeat him, for example, by not funding things. But by and large, if he signs an executive order, it happens. And so he's already achieved a huge number of things. Here's some of them. He pardoned 15 or 1600 J6 protesters, and I don't want to go into that big story, but my take on that is that Biden's so-called winning of the 2020 election was clearly fraudulent. There is much forensic evidence for that, and that a lot of Trump supporters knew it and were unhappy about it. And they met at the Capitol on January 6th to protest. They were then set up by the authorities, who turned it into what they called a riot, even though it wasn't. And they then hunted down and jailed more than 1,000 people, even though the Capitol Police opened the doors and invited them in and let them walk around the Parliament. So it would have been a bit like the Australian Federal Police putting agent provocateurs in the crowd at Canberra, faking a attack on a federal police officer, and then arresting 1,000 of us peaceful protesters in Canberra and jailing us all. That, to me, is what went on 4 years ago. So Trump has basically pardoned just about everybody who was still in jail 4 years later based on that. And at the same time, as he was going out, Biden pardoned a whole lot of what we would regard as the bad guys from the outgoing administration, including Fauci. And those of us who've been in that space probably agree that Fauci is probably one of the great mass murderers of all time. Nevertheless, Biden preemptively pardoned him for any crime he might have committed in the last 10 years. And a number of people have immediately said, well, hang on, we want to go after this guy because he was a bad guy, and that's, now he's going to get away with it. And I did some digging into it, and a pardon is not nearly as good as you might think it is. So when you get a presidential pardon, what that means is that you are deemed to have admitted guilt. So you are pardoned, but the rub is you admit guilt. What the pardon means is you don't get punished. So in some ways, this is actually better, because if Fauci accepts the pardon, he's admitting guilt. The US Supreme Court has ruled on that. If you accept a pardon, that is an admission of guilt. And there's the Supreme Court case back in 1915. Accepting a pardon is a de facto admission of the crime. There is legal precedent. So if Fauci accepts the pardon, he's admitting that he was guilty of all the things we think he was guilty of. But it gets better. All the pardon does is say that you don't get punished. It doesn't mean you can't be tried. So Fauci can still be tried for whatever crime you want to try him for. And even better, he doesn't get to plead the fifth in court. If you remember, pleading the fifth is all those I don't remembers or I'm not going to answer because it might incriminate me. Once you've been pardoned, you can't incriminate yourself. So you have to answer. And if you don't answer questions in court, you're in contempt of court. And that's a new crime because that comes after the pardon period. So in some ways, this is a benefit because there might be lower level people in this chain who will sing like a canary in court because there's no consequences. And they certainly don't want to be caught in a lie, because if they lie in court subsequently, that's perjury, and that's an offence too. So
well, apparently I've been hearing, Bruce, too, that apparently because it's a federal pardon, a presidential pardon, it doesn't stop the state, like you said, stop the states coming after them, and individual people are coming after that. I'll just quickly bring on, if you can bring it up on the stage quickly. I'll just change this. But RN, been following Lindsay RN, who was a vaccine-injured nurse, and she was saying your pardon doesn't mean a can of beans to me, because guess what? I can still prosecute Fauci via international human rights tribunals. It's game time, baby. So there's options, and people are talking about that. So yeah, there's lots of noise still that, and I think people will be rubbing their hands together on that.
Yep. So state courts can still prosecute Fauci, and international courts can still prosecute them. The pardon is a US federal pardon. But now he's not allowed to say, I'm not answering. And if he's caught out in a lie, including in what he said in court previously, even if he's exonerated for the previous lie, if he says something now that contradicts that, that may be evidence that he's perjured himself this time. So, yeah, Fauci and all the others are not out of the woods based on this, and that's good to see.
Yeah, that's it. A lot of people will be waiting bated breath to see what happens there.
So what else is the new broom of Trump proposed? So Trump has signed an executive order day one that says sex is male or female. That's it. And with that goes all of the other DEI transgender BS. He said basically no, there's only two sexes. And you notice they've said there's sex, and we discussed this last week. Let's forget the term gender entirely. Let's use gender for French verbs and not for people. You know, nobody asks what gender your dog is because you can't find out. If it's the feels, as we discussed last week, your dog can't tell you what sex it feels like. And even if it could, the dog doesn't know what the definition of each one is. So it's very refreshing to say not only is he not diving into the gender BS, but he's saying there's only two sexes. Not two genders, there's two sexes. Well done, the Trumpster.
Yeah. And I wonder how all the felines around the world, you know, the cats feel that, you know, they've been, you know, appropriated by kids in school that want to behave like cats and have cat dishes and all that. I wonder how the felines around the world feel.
All the furries. All the furries. Now, final point on that is, who would have thought it would ever be necessary for a president to actually issue a decree saying that there are only two sexes and they are male and female?
Yeah.
Do you reckon they would have had to do that in 1850? Would that have been something that the incoming president would have spent his time presidential decreeing on?
It's the sign of the times, isn't it, Bruce? It's the world we live in, eh? Oh, J-Space, my dog's a furry. Oh, there you go. Yes. Yeah, my dog's a furry. There you go.
All right.
And it's I'll just quickly comment into that as well, because I saw something come through today where Trump was at a church, and I don't know which church it was actually at, and she was saying that for Trump to consider, you know, all the transgender children and all that, and I'm thinking, well, this was a woman, a female pastor, and I'm thinking, well, isn't that a bit contradictive as I guess a Christian to say that? Does that mean that pastor believes there's more than that you can actually change your sex and gender? I mean, it's a bit confusing, and that was quite an interesting clip watching that, and Trump sitting there with a vice president and that as well. So, and g'day, Michael. Yes, we will be wrapped up by 8 o'clock, I reckon, mate. So don't stress.
Easily.
You're watching. You'll say no.
10 or 15 to go, Michael.
No, all good. See, we've got second best. We haven't got Trump. We haven't got Elon watching, but we've got Michael going on. G'day, Michael.
Now, here's some of the details that flow on from that order. So the executive orders includes the following provisions. Government-wide, it is a biological reality that there are two sexes, and these are male and female. In addition, all gender ideology guidance, communication, policies and forms are removed. So the third or self-identify your gender box, that sounds like that's going. It says agencies will cease pretending that men can be women and women can be men. Woman means an adult human female. Now, that is something we've struggled with, Mark. Now we know what a woman is.
And needed a presidential decree to let us know. Amazing.
Okay. Government identification like passports and personnel records will reflect biological reality and not self-assessed gender. The practice of housing men in women's prisons and taxpayer-funded transition for male prisoners ends. And finally, the forced recitation of preferred pronouns is ended. How do we vote for this guy? Can we have him here?
Well, don't hold your breath with the Liberals, because, you know, we've seen some comments coming out of Dutton, and we know that there's no future with Labor or Greens or anything anyway. But Dutton's come out saying that he's not going to pull out of the Paris Climate Agreement like Trump has. So we've got a long way to go here in our country, haven't we? So, and Michael's just said he's actually not on till 9 o'clock. So I don't know if we're going to go that long because Bruce, might be getting a bit weary by then. But good to know, Mike. Good to know.
I've got to go out in the street and chop up a tree, if you remember. 5 minutes before we started, the neighbour came in and said the road's blocked by a tree. Mm-hmm. So I handed him my chainsaw, but all he's done is make a car-sized gap in it, so I'll be back there. And look, that's an aside, but we've talked about this in the past. If I was in the city, I'd be ringing the SES to come and cut that up. And if I went and cut up myself, the police would probably come and arrest me for not having, a high-vis vest on. Mm. Here in a small community, and humans are meant to live in, communities of 100, 200, 300 people. That's what I live in. My neighbours come in and said there's a tree across the road, and I've handed him a chainsaw. Mm. No experts required.
Yeah. Yep. No, exactly right. There we go. Anyway, don't make it too hard.
That was an aside. Mm-hmm. What else have we got from the presidential decrees on day one? Donald Trump has announced that all military members who were discharged for refusing the COVID mandate will be reinstated with full back pay and receive a formal apology from the United States government. I wouldn't mind that here, actually.
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely. Every health worker, Bruce, what do you reckon?
Yep. Also, Trump will declassify all files related to the JFK assassination.
Oh, yeah. Wow. That's a big one.
And for people who haven't been down that rat hole, even today, 60 years after JFK was assassinated, the majority of the American population believe that was an inside job. Mm-hmm. 60 years later, most of the people weren't even alive at the time, but they've heard enough and are suspicious of government enough to think that something smelly went on there. And the fact that the files are still secret goes along with that. So it'll be very interesting to see what comes out of that, particularly given the fact that RFK Jr. was John F. Kennedy's nephew. And RFK Jr. now has a senior health position in the incoming administration.
Yeah, and just interesting, and I haven't looked too much into it. Obviously, I haven't gone down so many rabbit holes to go down, but I saw a post come through, and I've got to get it confirmed, that apparently there's a view, or there's just made a decision that the Port Arthur massacre files are going to be locked down for another 70 years, apparently. So if anybody knows about that, it'd be interesting to find out more about that, and why would they want to lock it down for apparently they were going to digitize a lot of the information and lock it down for even longer. So anyway, might be worthwhile looking into that a bit further. And why would you?
And seeing as you've mentioned that, and again, just to enhance my rabbit hole conspiracies, I've looked into Port Arthur as well. And as you know, I'm a technical shooter. I'm a long-range shooter. In fact, a week ago, I took out my long-range rifle and I scored a bullseye at 750 metres with my first shot. So basically, I hit a 20-cent piece at 750 metres. And some of the things that stink about Port Arthur are, one, there was what's called an inverse kill ratio. In almost all shootings, you expect 1/3 of the victims to be dead and 2/3 to be wounded. Port Arthur, it was the other way around. It was 2/3 dead, 1/3 wounded. And it was like 50 or 60 people. It wasn't just, 3 and the stats could be out. That was very unusual and unlike just about any other worldwide mass shooting. You had, when the weapons were recovered, there were 2 alleged weapons, one of which had apparently been burnt in a fire when the building adjacent to Broad Arrow Cafe had been burnt during the assault on Bryant. And as a result of that, they were unable to do forensics to match the recovered bullets and shell casings to the weapon. I can tell you, you can burn You can burn a firearm. It's not going to affect the barrel. The barrel is getting 1,000 degrees Celsius hot gases going down it thousands of times in use. It doesn't care if it's cooked in a house fire. So that's just utter BS. It was also very interesting that Bryant never went to trial. Convenient, wasn't it? He just went quiet. And you also would notice how quickly they rolled out the so-called gun buyback or the gun confiscation. They had ready-to-go legislation to disarm the population afterwards, just like New Zealand did with the mosque shooting. And look, there's other things too, but yeah, I question everything nowadays, and there's a lot of smelly bits. Now, I'm going to just zip over here to, where's Robin? Have you come up, Robin? Show. Robin, I've got a British 303 in pristine condition. My first dry shot at 1,000 yards was out by 15 centimetres. Robin, I've got a 1954 Mark IV Blondie. So the ultimate 303, which I took out of the grease a few years ago. It had been stored since it was made, and it is a very fine weapon. So I'm pleased to see that you also understand the 303.
Nice. Well, it's straight over my head, brother.
Yes. All right, I better keep moving.
Mm-hmm.
All right, what else were in the presidential decrees of the first day? I don't have the details here, but freedom of speech and ending federal censorship is happening under the Donald. And if you remember all of the things that the American government and our government did to shut people up during COVID, and they're still trying. How's the mad bill going, Albo? Are you really going to go ahead with that? What about the old age limits for Twitter and other things? Do you really want to see if you can butt heads with Elon Musk over this? Or at a time when the Donald's got to decide which countries are friendly to American ideals and therefore don't get tariffed as badly, and which ones aren't. So my prediction here is that the age limits on social media will be watered down to ineffectiveness, and that the mad bill will also not be represented, because if it is, you might just find that the Donald puts a 25% tax or tariff on Australian imports to the States, which we can't afford.
Yeah, and just adding to that, you mentioned obviously Albo, but we see that the coalition's no different, because ultimately I think they drafted the mis and disinformation bill initially, and obviously also supporting the under 16. So if people think that the coalition's any better for our future, tell them they're dreaming.
My daughter has just sent me, I don't know if that'll show.
I might have to take off the share screen for a sec, and then hang on, we'll take this off and we'll see if I can bring you up. Just you, Bruce. What's that? As of what does it say there? As of today, I will be what? In the official, what does that say? Read that out for us, brother.
As of today, it will henceforth be the official policy of the United States government that there are only two genders, male and female.
Yes.
Well, in fact, he said two sexes, but there you go.
There you go. Absolutely. And we need to get exit the WHO. That's right. Gail, that's right. We do
about to come to that. About to come to that. What else is in the day one promises? Changes to the energy, the green dream. So he's withdrawn from the Paris Climate Accord, and he stopped meddling in all those annoying little bloody things that they do to us to force us to use energy devices that don't work. So things like shower heads, we don't have to have those stupid water saving shower heads and toilets, washing machines, light bulbs that aren't bright enough and take a while to come on, dishwashers, etc., etc., etc. So maybe he'll even get rid of the auto stop feature in my Mazda.
I can only hope, Bruce. We can only hope.
It sounds like the Donald is going to get out of people's lives and let them choose what products they want. And I support that.
And for all those people that were saying, I saw comments and that they were coming through on social media that, Elon Musk is going to be able to push this EV because he's heavily invested, obviously, in Tesla. Well, then obviously Donald's scrapped all the forced EV, mandates and all that sort of stuff. So, there's obviously a bit of dialogue happening there, and ultimately there's a lot happening there, which is, but Elon running up Doge should be a good thing as well.
Yeah, and the US also had a similar EV mandate to the one that Albo's going ahead with. So we discussed that a week ago with new vehicle emissions standards, which basically are going to make it impossible for you to buy any vehicle that you actually want to buy. And same in the States. They had a target for 50% of new light fleet to be EV within by the end of the decade, so by 2030. So that'll be all gone as well. And look, I'm not saying be selfish, open slather, go and wreck the place. I'm saying you let people do what they choose, and then they live with the consequences. So if we all go back to incandescent bulbs and find that in a year's time the planet is 5 degrees hotter and we're regretting it, you know what? It's our fault, and we get to go, damn, we better go back to those stupid light globes that don't work. Rather than having some experts with political agendas just forcing it down our throats. We're adults, respect our decisions, and if we bugger it up, it's our problem.
Yep, absolutely. Yep, and you're right there. The air conditioners, ultimately with smart meters and everything they control with solar and all that, the electricity companies can actually turn all that off, turn off your solar and everything else. They have the ability to be able to do that.
And Jace, I don't know if you go back a couple of episodes, I discussed how to turn off the idle stop feature in Mazdas, and you'll find you can just Google that. Mazdas have got a bonnet switch which tells the car that the bonnet is open so it doesn't idle stop, and that's there so as mechanics can work on it without the engine shutting off all the time. And if your car's like that, it's a dead easy thing to pull the wire off the sensor and it won't shut down anymore. But yeah, have a look at that.
Interesting if they've got a feature there, the air cons, if it's not hot enough outside that the aircon doesn't work, like what is that in your car? Oh, bloody hell.
Yeah, well, obviously, if you idle stop off, then the air conditioner's not running, is it?
Yeah, true. That's right. Absolutely.
Trump's taking the US out of the WHO again. So, and we were worried about that previously with all of the globalized health tyranny that was being pushed at us by the WHO. Well, the US ain't fallen for that. They're out of that.
Yep, no, good. So should we. And as I said, I caught up with Jody Clune over in WA. G'day, Jody, if you happen to be watching, from NERA, the initiative of the Aligned Council of Australia, helping people to write submissions about the IHRs and obviously the Exit the WHO initiative still going. So a lot of stuff happening there still, and agitate before any federal elections being called.
Yep. No worry. Alrighty, so that's just a quick snippet of where the US is going with their current course correction, and I have a lot of hope in a lot of those things because, as you know, I don't trust the experts of the government to tell me what's right for me because A, they don't know, and B, they lie about it. They've got their own agendas. Anyway, there we are, and this has been labelled a new dawn for America and optimism at Trump's second inauguration. And I'd like to rub the lefties' nose in a little point here, and that is, if you hadn't stolen the election in 2020, Trump would have been gone now, and you probably would have been inaugurating a Democrat. So he would have sailed on from his first presidency into his second 4 years with all the baggage of dishonest bureaucrats and people trying to stymie and obstruct his agenda, and he wouldn't have had the street smarts to do anything about it. So he would be finished now, and he would have done far less than he's likely to get done in the next year. This time around, he's got all three houses. So he's got the presidency, the Senate and the House. He's got most of the Supreme Court judges. He's got a huge mandate from the people, and he got woken up 4 years ago to just how corrupt the swamp is in Washington. And he's going to put a new broom through you that's far worse than it would have been if you hadn't done that 4 years ago. And it reminds me a bit of, if you remember the Barack Obama years, he was the great democratic hope, and he was going to unboil the oceans and the planet was going to heal and all that. But he went too far with all the leftist stuff. And do you know what Obama's biggest legacy was?
Mm-hmm.
You know, what's the main thing that he achieved in his presidency?
Oh, tell me, I don't really know.
It was Trump. The
Yes.
pushback to 8 years of Obama was Trump.
Mm.
And Trump came out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
And it was partly because the people had just had enough of 8 years of Barack Obama's policies.
Yeah.
So Trump was created by Obama, and Trump 2 was created by Biden. And he's going to achieve more than either of them. And it's a beautiful thing.
Well, it's almost providence, isn't it, Bruce? Because ultimately it may have been, that like you said, the election was stolen, and it gave everybody the idea of how corrupt the whole system is, and it was designed, and obviously it worked out that he ended up getting re-elected because of all the corruption that people were seeing. So it was like it was meant to happen.
Yep. Or as Brett Weinstein often says, welcome to complex systems. You try and get something, you get something else.
Yeah, 100%.
Don't control all the bits.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward for 4 years of all Australia's left-leaning media and bureaucrats' head exploding for 4 years.
Now, I just have a moment of caution there because, like I said, that previous slide said it was a new dawn for America. Here's the thing. They said that 4 years ago as well. So that's a 4-year-old picture from the news of Biden's election. That was a new dawn for America as well.
Mm-hmm.
As was 1932. That was the Hoover Roosevelt. And even Reagan. When Reagan got in, that was a new dawn as well. So I
wonder who's writing their script.
I temper all of this with the overall thing that, we think this time we've got the right person in power, and that's going to undo some of the government overreach. But the real solution isn't to occasionally try and fluke the right person into power. The real solution is to neuter government to the point where it doesn't matter who's in power because they've got no power to oppress us. That's what we really need.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, we've just got to keep pushing back, brother, and good stuff. Nice content brought along again. And, just before we do wrap up, because I know that Robin's coming on in about, 20 minutes, I think, less than that now, about 15 minutes. So we won't go too much longer and get wrapped up in that time. But I just wanted to quickly share this and get your take and see if you can work out. Obviously, we know of Baron Trump.
Yes.
You know of Baron Trump. And I'm just wondering if you could, I'm just going to play this and just see if people can work out what's better.
Sometimes the more you fuck around, the more you'll find out. And we found out.
What do you reckon, Bruce? What do you reckon Baron said to old mate?
Two things, but I'm pretty sure that's a fake piece. But nice music from the Australian band Akadaka in there as well. That was Thunderstruck.
Yeah, nice. You got old Thunderstruck. I'm growing up with the old Akadaka. Good stuff there, man. So yeah, it'd just be interesting if it wasn't. It'd be. I reckon Baron's going to be pretty based though. He's an autistic guy. He doesn't smile a heck of a lot, and I guess it'd take quite a bit to get him going. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Baron as he's a bloody tall lad. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. So, but closing, mate, probably just a bit controversial, but I want to just quickly just talk about this, and you and I have talked about this before. This come up with Ruction, right? He's put this post. I did see this post from Jericho, a Christian guy, and he was saying how he's contributed to the nation and he's been fighting back, and Ruction posted on it and I saw that post come through, and I saw some pretty atrocious stuff, pretty atrocious comments going on his timeline. And I know that we've been talking about multiculturalism and race and all this stuff in our country, but you know what, there's been a lot of amazing people. I was in the disability sector, lots of different industries. I worked with people from Kenya, people from India, some of the most amazing people. And it's just, I just want to make people aware that, and remember that there is an element of agitators behind the scenes that I found. Some of the comments put out towards him was absolutely atrocious, even for me. And I know that we talk about free speech and we want free speech and that, but not every person that is not a white Australian is a detriment to our country. This country was founded by people from those countries as well, and amazing people. And I think, as in general, we need to look beyond the agitation of what's been forced into us by a lot of things in the media. Like we said before, there's funding coming in from nefarious actors to agitators in rallies, in marches, even with our own group, the so-called freedom movement, and that there's paid actors that are there to really agitate things even for ourselves. So I think we also got to have the opportunity to call people out when they're just seeing someone of a different color and calling them a scumbag and you're not white and all this sort of stuff. So it was pretty sad to see some of those comments. But anyway, that's freedom of speech, and it's up to us to call that out as a society.
Yep. And before we all get labelled with the supposed shutdown word of racist, let me just repeat what I've said before. Race is hardware and culture is software. Mm-hmm. I don't care what your race is. I don't care what your skin colour is. I don't care what your eyes look like. I don't care how wide your nose is. I don't care if your hair is frizzy or not. That's hardware. What I care is what sort of person are you? How do you live your life, and what are your beliefs? That's called culture. Mm-hmm. And I've said before, I don't think a country can have more than one culture, because culture is all the the rules that you operate by, how you expect people to act, what they do, what you can trust them with, etc., etc., etc. So I'm dead against multiculturalism because I think it causes uncertainty and accidents. I am absolutely agnostic on multiracialism or multi-ethnicity. It's the same thing. If you're Australian, which means you share my love of freedom and self-reliance and community engagement, I don't care what you look like. And if you're a white guy and you've got a terrible culture and terrible beliefs, I don't like you either. If you share my beliefs, I'll embrace you. And if you share what this country is about, I'll embrace you. And if you don't try and change it, I'll embrace you. But if you want to call me racist for saying that, A, I'm not going to shut up just because you said, and B, you're wrong. I haven't said anything about race. I'm talking about culture.
Yep, 100%. And our culture is formed by people of many, many different ethnicities and races, and there's some amazing, beautiful human beings from all over the world, and we just got to remember that. And it's what sort of culture do we want Australia to be moving forward, and hopefully we can create a great one.
Well, I think we've come to the end of our first live stream without dropping out, so I'm gonna send the check off to Elon Musk and say thank you.
Yeah, no. Well, maybe you could bill the Australian NBN and get some of your $1 billion taxpayer fund money back, and use that to give to Elon.
For those who haven't watched previous shows, we've struggled for months with poor internet service and dropouts and blockiness. And eventually, on the advice of an honest employee at the Telstra shop, I went and paid for Starlink. So I had my NBN upgraded. No good. I complained to Telstra. The employee said, yeah, it's rubbish. Get Starlink, but don't get it off us because we throttle it. Go direct to the source. Thank you, employee. And I'm not going to say who you are because your employer wouldn't be happy. But, yeah. And in fact, like I said, like I went and picked up my dish, it got posted to me. There was two boxes in my little town of 300 people. There was me and someone else getting Starlink. And you know what? In the last week, my neighbours put it on as well.
Yeah,
So I think Starlink must be absolutely killing the NBN. Another example of private business being more agile and giving the people what they want, and the government solution being expensive and not working.
Well, maybe going into the future, maybe we don't just defund the ABC. We might have to defund the NBN. But anyway, there you go. Anyway, thanks, brother. Thanks for bringing everything, and thanks for the audience for hanging in, and especially those on the Clo network. And good on you, Michael, doing great stuff. It's almost like a TV channel now with the amount of content that's out there. So good stuff, and we'll see everybody next week. Hopefully, it'll be on a Monday. I think is generally the day we do it. We couldn't do it this Monday because Bruce had other commitments, but yeah, Monday we'll aim for 6 p.m. Eastern time, and on a Monday, and hopefully we'll be wrapped up before the other shows start, and go from there.
FAB.
Good on you guys. Thanks everybody for joining us, and keep safe, and keep punching and pushing back.
To fight again for that already burned, it was driven towards the flames. All the signs are there for all to see, the signs we've lost our way. When we jail our heroes and applaud our villains and turn our hearts away, like a silent choir, too scared to sing the anthem of a braver day. A song our children may never hear, the ballad of Dr. Bruce Paix. A song our children may never hear, the ballad of Dr. Bruce Paix.